Check it out. It's the Laugh to Learn podcast. What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Laugh to Learn podcast, your weekly source for a fun spin on all the news around the world. My name is Jacob Paveo, and as always, I come to you from the Great White North each and every Wednesday afternoon at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Now, actually, we should just, you know what? Let's go through the short rigmarole. If it's your first time here, thank you for checking out the podcast. If it's not your first time, welcome back. Don't forget, if you have yet to do so, hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends about the podcast. I say it all the time. Don't bother sharing on social media. You can. That's nice. But the best thing you can do is just spread it word of mouth, like a good old STD. Or I think we call them STIs now, you know, where you have to get face-to-face. So if you just tell someone about the podcast, it's the best way for other people to be willing to click on it. So that would be super cool beans. Speaking of time zones, I'm just going to jump right into this because it's like a side note. But there's all this renewed discussion because the clocks change next week. They go back an hour. So the big news story is, as it always does, the sun is going to be setting before 5 p.m. Eastern Time, and it's going to be rising after 9 a.m. in a few weeks. Of course, for those of you who don't live in Canada or in northern regions, the days get significantly shorter. Myself, as a snowboarder who prefers riding at night, I actually really enjoy it because all my gear is meant for when the sun is down. So as spring starts rolling around and the sun is up for longer, I actually don't even own any night-specific visors, so the tints on them are kind of yellowy and green for the most part, and it's meant to improve your vision. So during the daytime, it's very difficult for me to see, and I probably should just buy a straight, daytime, like either plain glass or a proper, like, sun-tinted visor or something, but either way, that's a complete random side note. You're probably going to see a lot of discussion on news and social media, once again, around the clocks turning back, because that happens November 7th, so I guess not this coming weekend, but the one after, between Saturday and Sunday night. And the big thing that Ontario is pushing for is they are saying, hopefully a whole bunch of politicians here are saying this is hopefully going to be the last one. But guess what? It's not, because the legislation here in Ontario relies on New York State to make the change, as well as Quebec. Quebec seems like they are willing to make the change, at least the majority of their provincial politicians, as well as the Premier of Quebec, has agreed that it is something they are going to truly explore in the coming months, and they may make the change. But I think we've talked about it on the show before. Because of the stock exchange in New York and Toronto, they want them to be in the same time zone. It's one of those things, like I've been saying for a long time, you can just shift when the Toronto Stock Exchange opens. It does kind of become an issue because basically what'll end up happening is what we know as winter time or whatever, will be the standard time that we use in Ontario. And it can make other things difficult, like shipping and whatnot, because Ontario businesses in the summer, when the clocks move forward an hour, all of our businesses will open an hour earlier. for the entire summer and close an hour earlier. So the impact that has on the stock exchange is pretty significant. But if you think about it, the big reason for that is typically when businesses put out press releases is when they open. But and that's designed to match the stock market. Like, that's what it's for. So if you think about it, it's like, well, yeah, just wait an hour and make the announcements an hour into your day. That way, the markets all open at the same time anyways, just that the clock here will say 8 a.m., whereas it will say 9 a.m. in New York. Actually, it's the other way around. It'll say 10 a.m. here because the stocks in the summer would open an hour later for us. And again, in the winter, they would be paired up together. So either way, there's a whole lot of BS going on with the clocks and the time movement. Personally, I don't care. Our days are so short anyways. The sun, no matter what you do, is not going to be up when you wake up in the morning, and it's not going to be up when you go to bed at night. If we're talking about the winter, like we end up getting like 5 to 6 hours of daylight in early to mid-December. So like, it's just like, whatever, man. What the clocks say has no opinion on my life. I agree it's kind of weird that we move them. And, for insurance purposes and stuff, there is significantly more car accidents and actually like stress-related deaths, like heart attacks, the week of the clocks moving either forward or backwards. So interesting thing that you're probably going to see a lot about. I wanted to touch on it as we open the show just because literally this morning, that is all I'm seeing on news feeds, and I do not want to make a full episode about it. But as you could tell from the title of this show, we are going to get to this Facebook whistleblower who is talking to Parliament in the United Kingdom. But first, I want to touch on, of course, a COVID story, because it can't be a week right now during the pandemic without a COVID-related story, as today was the deadline for healthcare workers in BC, in British Columbia, on the west coast, of course, where they had to be vaccinated or they will be suspended without pay. This is a story from the Vancouver Sun, written by Camille Baines, where she says, quote, BC's health minister called Tuesday a solemn day as 4,090 healthcare workers missed the deadline for mandatory COVID-19 vaccination and were placed on unpaid leave before they could potentially lose their job. That is just over 3% of BC's 126,000 healthcare workers. So 4,090 have been suspended. Adrian D. said 1,369 of the unvaccinated workers are in the interior region of the province, and that overall vaccination rates are also low in Northern Health. So obviously, the report goes on, but this is something we've been talking a lot about on the show lately, and it's something that I think is super important. And I mean, perhaps by listening to me over the last, say, month and a half, you may have noticed that I'm very torn when it comes to these sorts of rules in different places and different businesses. Now, in healthcare, and this includes homes for senior citizens, and sort of like long-term care homes and stuff like that, hospitals, obviously, doctors' offices, any form of healthcare, but specifically in senior residences, the health minister in BC went on to say that currently there are multiple hospital-related outbreaks, and employees who are unvaccinated are put at an insurance risk but because of course they have to attend work. You or I, assuming you don't work in healthcare, because most people don't, if there's an outbreak at our work, we stay home. No one goes into work, right? It eliminates the risk of contracting the virus at work. But in healthcare, it's kind of the opposite of what you do, right? If there's an outbreak at work, whether it's a hospital or a senior's home or whatever the case may be, you go to work. And he talks about how difficult it's becoming to manage these outbreaks with unvaccinated staff. One thing that's not being discussed that I think should be is that insurance risk. Because if you contract coronavirus and have significant side effects, you don't need to die, but just significant side effects because of it, at work, when you had to go to work, you may be in a position where your employer, in this case a major hospital or a senior residence, as I keep going back to, may be responsible in some way legally. So you may actually have a civil lawsuit that you can open up against your employer. So this is partly a way for these employers to protect themselves. And it's one of those things that, like I talked about the garbage man last week, right? You have to be vaccinated against like tetanus and hepatitis and all sorts of stuff to be a garbage man. And so I don't understand why in healthcare, COVID is looked at as something that, for whatever reason, people think you shouldn't need to be vaccinated for. The big thing that people say is like that I've seen at least is like, well, you don't have to be vaccinated for the flu to work in a hospital, which is true, but statistically, the flu kills far less people in the hospital than otherwise. It's like 60,000 people around the year, 500 Americans a year or something like that die of the flu, and they are typically it is typically the same crowd that dies of COVID, but in significantly lower numbers. It's not a vaccine that's proven effective anyways. So like all those things considered, the COVID vaccine is not the same as a flu vaccine. It should not and cannot be referred to as such. So what you're saying is, or what they're saying, that they being the administrative individuals working in the province, because once again, our provinces control our healthcare system. So they are the CEO. They are the boss of the hospitals and everything. And they are making this decision. And to me, it only makes sense. I'll return to any other job. I don't think I see a reason. It's not like the garbage man who can get hepatitis by grabbing a bag with glass or, a needle, or like glass is the most common thing though, right? Like you can literally cut yourself on a piece of glass and catch hepatitis from it, from throwing someone's garbage. It's a on-the-job risk. And so to stop that from happening, you have to be vaccinated against that. Tetanus as well, right? They're throwing garbage all day. You can cut yourself on something, and tetanus is very common. And that's why everyone gets a booster shot, right? Or everyone should be getting booster shots. Not the COVID booster, just to be clear, but just a booster shot, which is your tetanus shot, like every 7 years or 9 years or whatever the hell it is. And so when you look at it like that, you sort of come to, or I come to an understanding that it makes sense for healthcare workers to be vaccinated against COVID because of their job. It doesn't necessarily make sense for anyone else. It has to be job by job. And like I'm hearing of like unions, some government unions in, municipal level and provincial level office jobs where you have to be vaccinated or you're going to get laid off. That, I don't know. Like, I actually think you may have a legitimate argument if you're an office worker who, or even like someone who works in a store directly with the public. I think you have a legitimate argument if you lose your job because you weren't vaccinated, that vaccination has nothing to do with your position. Absolutely nothing to do with your job. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting time. I really wonder if we're going to see any of these cases make their way to the Supreme Court. I do know that there have been filings with the Supreme Court here in Canada, or rather with the superior courts. It hasn't, because they have to review it before it can make its way to the Supreme Court. So I think there were like 3 cases that I've seen so far that were applied to the superior courts in different provinces because of people losing their jobs because they weren't vaccinated. And I wonder if the Superior Court will pick up the cases or if ultimately the Supreme Court will pick up any of these cases, because I think there is an argument to be had. But either way, we will, as always, continue to watch. Now, our main story is one that I'm sure you've seen. No matter where in the world you are, I'm sure you've heard about the Facebook algorithms that have been not really revealed, but just discussed in public discourse. And I'm just going to start it off with this. It's a story from Jeremy Merrill and Will Ormus at the Washington Post. And they write, quote, 5 years ago, Facebook gave its users 5 new ways to react to a post in their news feed beyond the iconic like. Thumbs up, beyond the iconic like, which was a thumbs up. They wrote this very awkwardly. They added, quote, love, haha, wow, sad, and angry. Now, unless you live under a rock, I'm sure you probably already knew that. Or, you know, maybe you're under the age of 25 and you've never even opened Facebook in your life. Good for you. Behind the scenes, Facebook programmed the algorithm that decides what people see in their news feeds to use the reaction emoji as signals to push more emotional and provocative content, including content likely to make them angry. Starting in 2017, Facebook's ranking algorithm treated emoji reactions as 5 times more valuable than likes, internal documents reveal. The theory was simple. Posts that prompted lots of reaction emoji tended to keep users more engaged, and keeping users engaged was the key to Facebook's business. Facebook's own researchers were quick to suspect a critical flaw, favoring, quote, controversial, unquote, posts, including those that make users angry, could open the door to more spam, abuse, or clickbait inadvertently. A staffer whose name was redacted wrote in one of the internal documents, that is what a staffer whose name was redacted wrote in the internal documents. A colleague responded to the email saying, it's possible. Now, the story goes on from there. You can find that on, once again, the Washington Post. Now, I don't understand why this is news to anyone. Because, like, first of all, who I'm seeing talk about this, honestly, is CNN and Fox News. And literally no one, like, no podcasters care about this. Reddit doesn't care about this. It just, because anyone, honestly, between the ages of 25 and 30, remembers when Facebook became really bad to use. And it was roughly around 2015 and 2016 when Facebook started making a ton of money from ads and became the #1 ad company on the internet. Google up to that point was. And when Facebook surpassed Google and started pumping everything into user retention, you know, they added the different emojis and all this stuff, Facebook really started to suck, and it was right around the time that Instagram started popping off. And then, of course, Facebook would buy Instagram almost immediately after Instagram started popping off. Twitter also, around 2010, Twitter really started getting popular. So at this point, Facebook added this to really compete with Twitter and then buy Instagram. So basically, no matter what, if you weren't on Twitter, you were on a Facebook platform, when it comes to social media, at least. And, I mean, everyone knew that what you were seeing was no longer what it used to be. Because it literally used to be, if you're an old school, like I joined Facebook in 2009, and if you're an old school Facebook user from like before 2012, I would say, maybe before 2013, literally there was no post algorithm. It was just the most recent posts. And that was it. From only your friends. Like nowadays you log on to Facebook and you're seeing like all sorts of shit from different places that you don't follow, recommended posts from all over the place, recommended friends, recommended everything. Because that's how they make money. That's how they keep you. Because you used to log into Facebook, once a day. 'Cause remember, we had to go onto a computer to do it. So we used to log into Facebook once a day, scroll through it, and be like, hey, I'm caught up, maybe post something and move on, and then come back tomorrow. But now, because there's all these recommendations and they hold posts out so that every time you come, there's something new to see and whatnot, it really changed, and it's a totally different platform. The issue that I have with this whistleblower, and not necessarily with the whistleblower, because I mean, I don't know. Like, I think this woman is going to get very rich by writing a book, and she was already very rich by being an executive at Facebook. Like, I feel no pity for her. She worked there for years, lost her job, and then suddenly is like, yeah, everyone needs to know about this shit that everyone already knew about. But the people who work in politics and apparently the people who work at these, mass media news companies, I guess they didn't know about it because they're all run by old people. Which is honestly probably the case. Like the average politician is over the age of 55. Most of them probably never had an actual personal Facebook account. Forget about personal Twitter accounts and stuff like that. Like the majority haven't. And the same is probably true of the executives at a lot of these news companies. And so what ends up happening is they hear this whistleblower say, yeah, like Facebook's pushing negative content to people to keep you there and to make more money. And we all look at that and go, yeah, that's why we all went to Instagram and Twitter, because Facebook started doing this. And then the old people jumped on Facebook, shout out to old people, and they're the ones who are making Facebook all of this money. I mean, realistically, like I've looked at ads for the podcast and running ads on Facebook, and I'm probably going to end up trying it, but I've been talking to people about it and whatnot. And the average age that you get by running ads on Facebook is between, like for podcasts, the average click you get is people between 30 and 45, which is not the target demographic of Facebook. It fits my podcast, so that's why I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I'll do that. But it's not my core demographic, but it's my secondary demographic for sure. So it's like this weird thing where it's, and I'm not saying that they are the old people using Facebook. Facebook, by the vast majority, is over 40 and 50 years old. It's older people moving into seniors. Like an extremely large number of seniors spend the majority of their time on the internet, on Facebook, and like similar like games that are owned by Zynga and Facebook and whatnot. So that to anyone should be like, oh, this is literally a non-issue. Old people come to Facebook. Facebook adopts the platform for folks who will be driven by things that upset them when they read them. And like, I mean, you just got to realize that most people on the internet aren't actually reading anything. Most young people, most users. That's why Instagram is so popular. That's why Twitter is so popular. It's like, what are we at, 220 characters? Or it used to be 160, so now it's probably 320 characters or whatever the limit is now on Twitter. Literally, it's like headlines. That's what people want to read. They don't want to read these long posts and blah, blah, blah. That's not what the internet is anymore. And that's what Facebook is, and that's why it's just not that popular. And I think the conversations happening are really just conversations run by people who have no idea what's going on in the internet right now. Like, they're the type of people, and honestly, like, I'm telling you, I've been watching a lot of, like, CNN, Fox, ABC, and MSNBC coverage on this Facebook stuff. And as I'm watching it, the only thing I'm thinking is, I wonder if I could explain to this panel of people having this discussion, I wonder if any of them have ever sat down and watched a Twitch broadcast. Not necessarily gaming on Twitch, but just any Twitch broadcast ever. Or any live YouTube show ever. Like a live YouTube podcast or anything like that. Like, have they ever listened to the Joe Rogan podcast? Not are they a fan of it, but have you ever listened to it? The most popular podcast in the world. The most, like, by far, Rogan's podcast is the most active form of media in the world, the most accessed. 200 million listeners a month. 200 million uniques. 200 million, okay? CNN and Fox, which is the largest, does like 60,000 a day. A day. 60,000 is like a big number for a news broadcast. And it's like unbelievably altered statistics here. And then the people having these discussions, like I hear them, when Sanjay Gupta went on Rogan's podcast, there were all these people, even on Fox and stuff. Sanjay Gupta, of course, a doctor who works with CNN. So left and right-wing media contributors, let's say, media personalities, were like, I don't understand why he would have gone there. We have an audience here that needs to hear the truth and the right perspective and stuff. It's like, yo, your audience literally is not even a tenth the size of his. One show, his show with Sanjay Gupta, I think the last time I looked at it was at like 20.5 million views. 20.5 million on YouTube, which isn't even his primary platform. We can't see his Spotify numbers, I don't think. I don't think that they show them. I know my Spotify numbers don't show up. I don't think his do. I don't think Spotify shows that for podcasts. But think about that. 20 million on his side platform. And it's also free on Spotify, so it's not like, it's not like premium content over there. So when you're talking about, let's use the lowest number, 20 million people watched this one interview. Sanjay Gupta might have 20 million views on CNN over the course of a year, and he got it in 3 hours on Rogan's podcast. And now all these people are like, oh, why would you go over there? Because they just don't understand the internet. And I think that's what's happening with this Facebook thing. So there's a lot of people pushing to break up Facebook. They're bad corporate citizens. Corporate citizenship. Now, I'll be honest with you. I graduated school in 2017. I graduated university. And so I'm basically 4.5 years out because I finished in April, whatever, right? So 4.5 years out of school. When I was in school, a good corporate citizen was all about things like green policy, being environmentally responsible, giving shareholders maximum returns is the number one thing they teach you about corporations and corporate management. The number one thing is shareholder returns. And now all of a sudden, Facebook, because they made a move for shareholder returns, is the enemy of the people by these business insiders on CNN and Fox and MSNBC. And I'm sitting here like I literally graduated school 4.5 years ago. I know things haven't changed, and I certainly know they weren't more liberal when you guys were in school 20 years ago. They probably weren't even talking about green policy back then. So it's like they're changing the definition of what good corporate citizens are. And they're saying that Facebook is hurting their users to maximize revenue. That's literally what every company in the world does. They mark up their product to sell it and make money at your detriment, right? Like, even a company like Walmart, you go buy something for $10 at Walmart, Walmart probably paid $4 to get it there. Does that make them bad corporate citizens because they're increasing the charge by $6? Well, what if you're a single mother? Or what if you're a homeless guy who just wants some toothpaste and they've marked it up by 40%? Does that mean they should give it to you for free? Or not for free, but for cost, you know? No, it doesn't. They're a business. That's what they do, and that's what Facebook does. And there's all this rhetoric about what it means to be a good corporate citizen. I don't think they know what that even is. First of all, it's a totally made-up term. If you actually look into it, as I said, it's based around green policy. Historically, has nothing to do with the internet and and providing a service that favors the people as opposed to the shareholders, which is your fiduciary duty as management in a corporation. If Facebook knew, and this is something like, cut this, quote it, it's absolutely true and everyone needs to know it. If Facebook knew that they could, let's say, double their revenue by adding in these emojis and favoring emoji reactions above likes, if they knew that that would double their revenue and they didn't do it, you should know that if the shareholders found out about that, they could strip the entire board of their position, and the board or whoever made those decisions could be found guilty in court of not fulfilling the fiduciary duty to maximize shareholder revenues. So how am I seeing legal analysts in the not mainstream, because it's not mainstream, but the mass market media pushing the concept that Facebook shouldn't have done this? You're literally saying that these people, you can actually go to prison for doing that. There is literal federal crimes for as management of large public corporations for intentionally hurting shareholder value without making the shareholder known ahead of time. They would have had to say to the shareholder, all of our research says we should do this, but we're not going to. And then if you think any of the shareholders would have been like, oh, you know what? You're right. Let's not make more money. What? Are you an idiot? Do you think and I guarantee you some of the people who are talking about this right now were or still are shareholders of Facebook, all the people that you're seeing online. At this point in time, well, I guess I'm in a few mutual funds, but directly, there's like maybe 5 different companies I'm directly invested in right now. And if any of those companies came to me as a shareholder and were like, hey, we think this is really going to work, but it'll make people feel a little bit more stressed. Do you think I'm going to be like, yeah, you know what? Let's not stress the public and let's lose money. Won't that be fun? Let's take that trade-off? No, absolutely not. It's a cutthroat world, and people want to candy coat it and paint everything with this nice yellow, beautiful, sunny paintbrush that like this is the actual world we live in, when it's totally not. And a few of my friends have made decent money off Facebook over time. And I guarantee you, if I were to ask any of them, should Facebook have avoided doing this? I've never invested in Facebook, just to be honest up front. But I guarantee none of them would be like, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. I would much rather have not made the 15% on Facebook over the last 10 years, or it's probably way more than that, actually. Why are we having, how am I having this discussion right now? As someone who's literally an expert in finance and accounting. How am I sitting here listening to these business analysts who are paid millions of dollars a year to talk about business and markets. Why am I listening to them all say, oh yeah, Facebook, bad corporate citizens, should have made a change? You sound like you know nothing about the capital market. Now, I understand, like, you have people like Elizabeth Warren who want to break Facebook up and whatnot. That's a legitimate conversation about the monopoly of the internet, and it's absolutely legitimate to have that discussion and maybe even do it. That is a very American policy. It's something like here in Canada, we've never had. I mean, we do have, like, in the internet and cell phone world, there are two companies that dominate it, but we've never had a Canadian company own and monopolize a global market like Facebook has with Facebook and Instagram, or like Google with Google and YouTube. And Facebook also owns WhatsApp, right? So it's one of those things that, like, from my perspective, I'm looking at this and I don't know about breaking Facebook up. I don't really know. I don't know how you do that. How does it work for the shareholders? How does it make any difference? I don't know. But we can go down that road and have that discussion, right? We can totally have that discussion. The thing that I refuse to budge on is that Facebook should have operated any differently here. And I implore anyone who feels differently to try and convince me. Because, like, this is what I do. This is what I know above anything else. And I know that these guys, if not had been charged criminally, had this stuff come out later, that they chose to do something that would directly, or if they had chose not to do something that would have directly increased retention and revenue, had they chose not to do that, they would have been either charged criminally, or today they would be getting sued out their asses, and they would be losing everything they own because of how much money they would have cost the shareholders. There's no such thing as a good corporate citizen. Corporations are in the business of making money. Amazon, people discuss all the time as a great corporate citizen because they can deliver packages to you the same day. Things are so much cheaper, blah, blah, blah. All these reasons. They're very green-based company, and they're doing all these efforts to help the environment with their delivery. That's all well and good, but you know what all of those things are related to? Literally, making themselves more money. Amazon makes more money than any other company in the world. They're not good corporate citizens. They are fantastic, capitalized managers. They know how to make their shareholders happy and their customers. And guess what? Facebook does too, because people are addicted to negative reactions, to having negative reactions. It's like horror movies. Facebook is literally like an active horror movie. Why is it okay for it to be made, it being IT, the clown movie, right? Why is it okay to spend $100 million, make that movie? I don't know what they actually spent on it, but they probably made a shit ton more, right? One of the biggest horror movies of the last decade, financially. Why is it okay for that to be done and to intentionally stress people out and make people feel gross watching a child saying that you can float too, okay? Why is that okay? But when Facebook does it in a different way to make people upset and get money from it, oh, suddenly it's not. What, was Facebook not being upfront with it? How are they not being upfront? You scroll through your feed and you know what they're pushing you. People have been talking about this for years. It's just that they weren't talking about it in the mass market media setting. They weren't talking about it right now in the UK House of Commons, which, like, I don't know what the UK is going to do. What's the UK going to do? Tell the US that they have to break up Facebook? Like, come on. You have no control over that. What are they going to do? Make Facebook change their algorithms in the UK? I don't understand how this is a problem. Just stop using Facebook if you don't like it. Most people under the age of 25 don't even have Facebook accounts. It's not a thing anymore. Facebook is not a popular platform for young people. It's simply not. And I don't know where this is going, because basically my thought process is like, where does the discussion end? Like I said, Walmart marking up products. Does that help the end user in any way, shape, or form? Or Amazon marking up their products. Does it help the end user in any way, shape, or form? No, right? Anytime you buy a book on Kindle, do you know what it costs Amazon to sell you a book on Kindle? Literally nothing. They own all the technology. It's all developed. They sell so many books and apps and whatnot on their Kindle devices that they probably, to keep their servers live and everything, they probably spend less than 1,000th of a penny of every digital book sale, right? And so, the author of the book gets a percentage of every book sold, and that's it. But most authors would take $2 or $3 a book. The publisher maybe gets, $1 or $2 a book. So, okay, Amazon could sell basically every book for $5 digitally. But they don't. They sell them for 15 or 20. Why? Because they make a shit ton more money. Does it help the end user? No. Not in any way. Certainly, it's cheaper than buying a physical copy of a book. And that's why people have the impression. They're like, well, it's cheaper than this. Yeah, but they're doing the same thing Facebook's doing. They are hurting the user to make more money. That's what corporations do. And I just think people look at Facebook as the bad guy, just in general. It's nice to have an enemy. And like on The View, someone, I saw a clip, said that, I almost said Elon Musk, but Mr. Facebook there, Mark Zuckerberg, is like the most evil man in the world. And then someone else goes, yeah, Trump must be jealous or whatever. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, Facebook has spread American ideals and democracy faster than anything in the world ever has. Look at how many countries have democratized since 2008, 2009. The Arab Spring being the most obvious example. But, like, China had to turn Facebook off because they were like, whoa, this is getting too real. People are starting to get it. Okay? That means that you are spreading your idea. And they're, oh, he's the most evil man in the world. What the fuck are you talking about? It's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm sick of hearing it. I think that the problem with all of these mainstream news companies is that they're centered around people who make more money by spitting their ideas, spitting them out, and sticking with a certain ideology at the same time. Whereas most people who discuss news in the world today are like podcasts and YouTube shows and stuff like that. And I can only talk for myself, who has a small audience that, I have made some money off like merch sales and stuff like that, but I certainly have not made money doing this podcast. The expenses still far outweigh anything that I've ever earned. And, I do it because I like it. There's no ideology here that I'm trying to stick to. I just kind of see news like this, and using my own knowledge and expertise, right, I discuss my opinion of it. And I, in this case, just attack the idea that this is a thing at all, that this should be a main news story at all. And the problem is, when you watch televised news broadcasts, they aren't just there to tell you, like, for me, it's kind of like, yeah, Facebook is getting called out by this whistleblower. She's gone to the UK. They're talking about ways that they can change the algorithm in the United Kingdom and to make the user experience more enjoyable. that's a weird conversation to have, right? But that's not the that's a really weird conversation, because now we're talking about, once again, a bunch of old men and a few random old women in a room discussing how to make Facebook enjoyable 20 years after Facebook was relevant, or almost 20 years. So it's just like, what a weird thing to discuss. But no, instead the story is how Facebook is not a good corporate citizen. And that's where, like, I just have to say, it's just crazy. It's crazy talk. And it's like everyone is saying the same thing. Fox is saying the opposite, of course. And I'm just kind of in the middle, like, no one should be discussing this because it's not, like, it's just not a thing. It's so weird. It's so weird that we're here. It's so weird that Facebook is, for somehow people think, still relevant in any way. And I don't know how or why Facebook still makes the money they do. It's probably because of moves like this. Anyways, I'm just getting to the point in the day where my intermittent fasting is over so I can eat again, because I only eat for 8 hours a day. So, yeah, it is time for me to go eat. I'm sick of talking about this. I'm not sure if I brought any new information to you, but I hope if you've stuck through to the end this week that there is something for you to think about when it comes to what you hear in the media. Because when I say that the concept that you are hearing discussed of, the wording they keep using is Facebook is not being a good corporate citizen, it's simply something that you need to know, because I know a lot of people didn't go to school for business, and even if you did, you probably even fewer people specialized in corporate policy and in sort of things like I've done. And so it's just important for someone like me to stand here and just say, like, what you're hearing is simply not the case. It's not something that you should be worrying about. It's not something you should be thinking about. It's honestly just a whole lot of baloney, or what's Biden's word? Malarkey. It's a whole lot of malarkey. All right, so thank you, though, for tuning in to the podcast this week and checking it out, of course. My name is Jacob Paveo, and if you haven't done so yet, hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends, your family, your lovers, your haters, your sworn enemies about the Laugh to Learn podcast. That's the thing. If you like it, tell all your friends. If you don't, tell all your enemies to listen. And either way, once again, thank you for checking it out. All my social media links are in the description for the show. You can use the contact page over at laughtolearnpodcast.com. There's also laughtolearnpodcast.com/store if you're interested in some merch. Our sweaters and our long sleeve shirts, because it's coming to that wintry time of year, are always they are available in stock, ready to go. I'm going to place actually a new order for one, and I might even design a new one. I'm trying to think if I want to bring back the white writing on the black sweater, or a white hoodie. The problem is you can't eat in a white hoodie. I have a white Drew House hoodie, and it's like a $400 designer sweater, and I can't eat in it. So I barely wear it. I look fantastic in it, okay? Don't get me wrong. But I can't eat when I'm wearing it. The other day, I was like starting to cook, and I caught myself. I was wearing it as I was like standing by the stove cooking. I was like, oh fuck, I gotta take this off. It's gonna get stained and ruined. Anyways, that's where my thoughts are right now on the merch store. I don't really know what else to say. Have yourselves a fantastic week. I'll be back 1 p.m. Eastern Time next Wednesday. Yeah, until then, you know what to do. Keep on laughing and keep on learning.